Hello everyone. In our today's lecture, we are going to cover about the art and culture. Okay, so let's start. So first you can see there are two terms. The first is the art. The second one is a culture. So what do you mean by art and culture? Let's have a understanding on these topics first. First is art. Basically stands for paintings, drawings, sculptures, architecture. Okay, so these is formed by art, like paintings, like drawings, like sculptures and architecture. What do you mean by culture basically? Culture basically means beliefs, social practices, idols, values, and custom of the society. Okay, in what belief society believe, what are the social practices, whom they idols, what value they preserve, and what are the customs or traditions they have. They all together form the culture of a particular society or a particular area. Whereas art stands for the painting, sculpture, architecture, and drawing done by them. Okay, so here are two more important words which I would like to discuss with you so that you can understand the basic difference between them. So here we have two words. The first is sculpture and second one is architecture. Okay, so the question is, what do you mean by sculpture and what do you mean by architecture? Okay, so basically the sculpture was derived from Indo-European form, and basically its root word was kale, which means bending. Okay, so basically sculpture derived from Indo-European word kale, which means bending. Okay, whereas architecture is derived from Latin word tecton, means building. Okay, so when you bend something and when you design something in a bending form, it's basically a sculpture. But whenever you are building something, whether huge or small, this comes under the term architecture. Got it? So this is a basic difference between the sculpture and the architecture. So basically sculpture derived from Indo-European word kale, which means bending, whereas architecture derived from the Latin word tecton, means building. Okay. So basically it includes visual arts like painting and sculpture, forming arts like dance, music, theatre, and literature, architecture, cultural practices that highlights the richness of human creativity and heritage. Got it? So basically, first we are going to have a look on Indus Valley civilization. Indus Valley civilization, remember when I was teaching you about it, then I mentioned Indus Valley was fourth amongst the earliest civilizations. So there were total 4 earliest civilizations and Indus Valley was one of them. And these 4 civilizations were Indus Valley, thereafter Egyptian civilization, then Chinese civilization, then Mesopotamian civilizations. Got it? So these were the earliest civilization and Indus Valley was one among them. Got it? Indus Valley was one of the earliest urban civilization in the world with well-planned cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. Why it was called urban civilization? Why it was called urban? Why not rural? Remember in a previous lecture, I told you when there is a agriculture or not agriculture, you can say when there is a primary activities, then the area is known as rural. When there are secondary and tertiary activities, then the area is called urban. Okay. What do you mean by primary, secondary, tertiary activities? I had told you in a previous lecture. Okay. So basically, these practices were more in comparison of the primary activities. So that's why Indus Valley called as the urban civilizations. Okay. And they had a well-planned cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. And why they are called well-planned? Because there are two divisions of each city. First is citadel. Second one is lower town. So there were two main divisions of each cities. Got it? So basically, citadel was small and high class area. Basically, it's believed that the rich person of the city used to live in citadel, which was a small area. Okay. And that was covered by walls. Whereas the lower town was large area without walls and was house for commons. Means all the common people lived in the lower town, whereas the high and the rich class people lived in the citadel. Got it? Now come to the next point. It is well known for its sophisticated drainage and sanitary system. Basically, what we called it drainage, grid pattern, drainage system. And what do you mean by it? The streets and the drains cut each other at 90 degree or at 90 degree or right angle. So basically, suppose if this is a drain, then that was the pattern. It's a street coming and it is a drain. It is a drainage system. Okay. And here is the angle of 90 degree. So basically this was planned in entire city. Like street and drainage cuts each other at 90 degree, which is called the grid pattern drainage system. Okay. And also they had a poetry like this, and they had a seals which were used for the identity of the goats. Okay. I had told you all the things in a previous lecture. Got it? Thereafter, the term is for the Vedic period. Okay. So Vedic period came after Indus Valley civilization. Came after Indus Valley civilization. And it was also known as the Aryan civilization. The Vedic period marked the arrival of Indo-Aryans in the India, bringing with them Vedic literature and traditions. Okay. And you know, in our previous lecture, we had discussed the two names. First is Max Muller. Second is Bal Gangadhar Tilak. also known as BG Tilak. And can you remember why we discussed these names? Why did we discuss these names? Because they both were the person who gave the theory of the origin of the Indo-Aryans, who gave the theory for the origin of the Indo-Aryans. Okay, like Max Muller gave theory of Central Asia origin, whereas PG Tilak or Bal Gangadhar Tilak gave theory of Arctic origin. Okay, basically Max Muller was believed that the Aryans were coming from the Central Asia, and BG Tilak believed that the Aryans were coming from the Arctic Circle. Got it? Arctic Circle. Okay, and the Vedic literature, which was brought by Vedic peoples, or you can say the Indo-Aryan peoples, and that literature was Rig Veda, Samveda, Yajurveda, Atharveda, and other significant Vedic texts. Okay, so the first is Rig Veda. Okay, Rig Veda is also considered as the oldest testimony of humankind, or you can say it is the oldest written work by any human. Rig Veda. Okay, and Rig Veda basically comprise 10 chapters. And the last chapter which is also known as Purushukta. Okay, and it is the 10th chapter or the last chapter, and it is also the Purushukta is also the newest chapter. Okay, and why was the Purushukta was famous? Because in Purushukta there was a mention of four varnas. In a lecture of the Vedic period, I had told you that the Vedic society was divided into four varnas. And these four varnas are Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, the Shudras. Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and the Shudras. Okay. And what was their role? Okay. How you can define the person is a Brahman, or the person is a Kshatriya, the person is a Vaishya, and the person is a Shudra. How could you? So the answer is by their work, because these people had different kind of work to perform. Let's have a look on their work. The first is Brahmins. They were the scholars, teachers, and philosophers. So basically, if a person who is involving in the profession of scholars, teachers, and the philosopher, then he or she would be called as a Brahmins. Got it? Next one is the Kshatriya. Okay, these were basically the administrators, rulers, soldiers, and you can say fighters. Okay. If a person is in administration of the city, if a person is a ruler of the kingdom, if a person is a soldier of the royal army, and if the person is a fighter who fights for king and who fights for the society, then he or she would be called as the Kshatriya. Okay. So these were the rules for Kshatriya and these were the rules for Brahmins. Okay. Now let's have a look for the Vaishyas. If a person is involved in trade, if a person was merchant, if a person was farmer, then they were called as the Vaishyas. Farmer categories for large farmers, or you can say for landlords. Okay, so they were the Vaishyas. If a person is doing trade with somebody, if a person is a merchant who transfer the goods and services, and if the person is a farmer or basically a large farmer, or you can say the landlords, then they were considered under the Vaishyas. Got it? Similarly, like Shudras. If a person is artisan, if a person is labor, if a person is farmer, but small farmer. Okay, then let me write down again it in a clear form. For the category of Shudras, if the person is artisan, if the person is farmer or a small farmer, if a person is laborer, or if a person is cobbler or any such like profession, then he or she will be considered as the Shudras. Okay. So here we had discussed about the Varnas and what were their roles. Got it? And remember one thing. The Vedic period was divided into two forms, the early and the later. In the early Vedic period, there was one thing which was disappeared in the later one. And what was that? Varna division on work basis. It was a part of early Veda. Varna division on birth basis was a part of later Veda. Got it? Okay. Now come to the other points. Samveda, basically for musical things. Yajurveda, basically for sacrificial things. And Atharveda, basically for magical things. Okay. So these were the other Vedas other than Rig Veda. Got it? Now come to the classical period. Now classical period lies between 600 BCE to 600 CE. So the rises of several kingdoms and the empires in India, including the Mauryan Empire, the Gupta and the Satavahanas dynasty. Great advancements were made in various fields like art, architecture, literature and science. And remember, the Gupta period was called as the Golden Age. Golden Age. And what was the reason? Because of the advancement in art, in science, in philosophy, in math, and in architecture, and the various fields which we discuss in the chapter of Gupta period. Got it? Now, the Mauryan art. Okay. Now, in the Mauryan art, we had a rock cut architecture, especially the famous Ashok pillars. Okay, so let's have a discussion over the division of Mauryan art. Like the Mauryan art is not the one only. Mauryan art was divided on two bases. The first base is royal patronage, or you can say court art form, and the second one is popular art, or you can say non-royal patronage. Okay. So here's question is, what do you mean by royal patronage and what do you mean by non-royal patronage? First of all, just remember the things. The court art is also known as the royal patronage and the popular art is also known as the non-royal patronage. Okay. So now let's have a discussion over these 2 points. First is royal patronage. What do you mean by that? Was funded by the ruler. So it was called as a royal patronage. Whereas royal patronage that was not funded by the ruler. Okay. So basically, all the art forms which we see in the modern art culture, basically there are two forms. First is funded by the rulers, and second one is not funded by the rulers and basically built by some local merchant groups and some local people. Okay. So here you should remember royal patronage means the architectures which were built and funded by the royal orders, and second one is the architectures which were built and funded by non-royal orders. In court art, in the court art, basically we had three forms: palaces, pillars, and stoops. Palaces, pillars, and stoops. So it is very much obvious that the palaces would be built by the rulers only. Okay. And thereafter, the pillars were also made by the rulers and mainly the Ashoka. And Ashoka was the ruler of the Mauryan dynasty. Okay. And the stoops, what do you mean by stoops? We will have a discussion over it in our upcoming lectures. Okay. So these three things, the first is the palace, the second is the pillar, and the third is the stoop. They were built by the royal orders. Got it? Now come to the non-court architectures which were built by the non-royal orders, are also known as popular art. Then these were caves, potteries, and sculptures. Caves, potteries, and sculptures. Okay. So basically, these were the architects which were not built by the rulers of the Mauryan dynasty. Got it? Now come to the next is a Buddhist art. Okay. So in Buddhist art, we had the stoops, then the vihars, and the chaityas. Got it? So basically, first is the stupas or stoops. They were the dome-like architecture. Dome-like architecture. Okay, like this. So they were in this form, which is a dome. Dome-like architecture. Got it? So these are the stoops. And basically it is believed that the Gautam Buddha or Gautam Buddha who was the founder of Buddhism, when he died, then his body remains were kept in stupas. So basically you can say the stupas, which are in dome-like structure, contains the body remains of Gautam Buddha, who was the founder of the Buddhism. Got it? Now come to our next point. Is Vihar. Vihars were basically the monasteries, or you can see residential areas for Buddhist monks. Okay. So basically, the Buddhist monk, they used to live in the vihars. Okay. And the second we had is the Chaityas. Here you can see the spelling. Chaityas. They were basically the prayer halls. And they were in the form of open hall. Okay. So basically the vihar was a place and vihars is the place. They are still exist. Vihars is the place where the Buddhist monks live. Okay. And Chaityas are the place where they go and pray to their god. Got it? Now come to the Gupta period. Gupta period is basically famous for Ajanta and Ellora caves. Okay. So Ajanta caves. First is a Ajanta caves. They lies at Aurangabad, which lies in Maharashtra. Okay. And they are total 29 in number. Okay. And out of them, 25 are vihars where the Buddhist monk used to live. And the fourth are the Chaityas where they used to pray. Got it? So these are the Ajanta caves, which lies at Aurangabad, Maharashtra. Total number in are 29, and then out of them 25 are the vihars and the fourth are the Chaityas, and they were the rock cut caves. And what do you mean by rock cut caves? Suppose if this is a mountain, okay, and I cut here at that place and made it like this. Okay, so that area would be considered as a cave. Okay, so same like the Ajanta caves. These are cut in this form. Like these are the Ajanta mountains. And in these mountains, the caves were cut down and then this took a shape of the Chaityas and the vihars. Got it? Now come to the next is the Ellora caves. The next are the Ellora caves. Ellora caves, they are lies 100 kilometers away of Ajanta. Like if Ajantas are there, then Elloras lie right there, and they are of 100 kilometers decision. Got it? Sorry, 100 kilometers distance. Got it? And they were total 34 caves. They were total 34 caves. Out of them, 17 are for Brahmins. Thereafter, 12 are for Buddhist. And 5 are for Jains. Okay. So this is about the Ellora case. Got it? So here we have finished about this thing. In our next lecture, we will discuss about the religions and the religious philosophy of various religions which were existed in India and which are also existed in India in today's day. Till then, thank you.